What's happening, guys? Today I'm going to show you how to do a front and rear brake job on a Ford Escape. So before we dive into this, first of all, this procedure is going to cover 2013 to 2019 Escapes, all of them. It doesn't matter if it's, front wheel drive, all wheel drive, what engine's in it, they're all the same. With that said, if you guys need anything as far as parts or tools or anything like that, I'll have links to the pads and rotors, and then some of the tools that I have down in the description if you guys need any of that stuff. But with that, let's get started. All right, so I'm going to start with the front. Obviously, first thing, remove the wheel. All right, so to take the caliper off, there's two rubber plugs on the back side that you have to remove to get the caliper out on this thing. So that's one of them. Obviously, there's another one on the bottom bolt. Once you take the rubber covers off, there is a 7mm Allen bolt that you have to remove to pop the caliper off. So to remove the caliper, we got to get this giant spring clip off of here. Best way to do it is you're going to take the center of this thing, and the center of this needs to come toward the front of the car, and then sort of pop it out of the groove. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but as you can see, it's going to go flying. There's some decent tension on it, but yeah, you're gonna have to get that out to get that caliper off. So once that's off, that caliper will pretty much slide off of there. Grab a hook. And hang the caliper off to the side. On the inside here, you got two 18mm bolts holding the caliper bracket on. Go ahead and get those out. Get the bracket off. All right, now at this point, we can remove the rotor. So I'm going to put one of these lug nuts back on here, and just keep the rotor from flying off. And basically, just start beating it with a hammer, and it'll come off. Okay, so now before we go just, slapping stuff back together, come in here, clean up the hub, hit it with a wire wheel, clean all this rust and stuff out of here. Make sure the rotor has a nice flat surface to mate against. Obviously pull your old pad out of the caliper. The other thing that we have to do is I'm gonna go and clean up the caliper bracket here where the pad rides on both sides. So clean this up, obviously, push your piston back in, clean up your caliper bracket, and then we can go ahead and start reassembly. So to clean up the caliper bracket, I'm using my sandblast cabinet. I completely understand 99.9% of you guys are not gonna have one of these. This is just much quicker, much cleaner, and much easier than using a file. So to clean up this caliper bracket, you guys actually want to use a file on this thing if you don't have a way of sandblasting it and actually stripping the rust off. You want to take a file to the areas that I'm going to show you here in a second, and what that's going to do is that's going to let the pad freely move back and forth in the bracket. Up north, what ends up happening is these brackets rust up, it binds the pad in place, and then when you apply the brakes, the pads don't really release like they're supposed to, so the brakes wear out quicker than they should. So clean up the bracket if you guys need to, but the pad needs to move freely in the bracket. It should slide back and forth real easy. You shouldn't have to beat the pad into the bracket with a hammer. So over here at the bench, I've got the caliper bracket here all cleaned up, as you guys can see. So the areas that are silver that I sandblasted, those are the areas that you want to concentrate with if you guys are, just going to use a file on this. A file is pretty much the best way to actually remove that rust that's built up in those brackets. This is a bigger issue up north in the Rust Belt. What ends up happening here is you get rust built up on basically these surfaces that I sandblasted. So when the pad sits in here, the pad doesn't really want to freely slide back and forth. And when it doesn't slide back and forth, what happens is the brake applies and the pad never really moves back when you release the brake. So you get premature pad wear, and basically you're doing brake jobs more often than what you need to. So make sure these areas that I sandblasted are all nice and clean. Do whatever you need to do. I would use a file, guys. A wire brush really doesn't remove any material. A file, or I've used even in a pinch, I've used cutoff wheels on their sides and just dragged them back and forth real lightly. You actually need to remove the rust. Now, you don't want to obviously grind into the bracket, but you have to actually remove a little bit of material, and you're not going to do that with a wire brush. Next thing we got to do here, I'm going to pull these slide pins out. They just push out of the caliper, as you guys saw. I'm going to go ahead and lube those up. Once you got everything stripped on the caliper bracket, before you go back together, get some brake lube. And what you're going to do is you're going to take some of that brake lube and just put it on the bare metal. And what that's going to do is that's just going to keep the metal from rusting as quickly. It's still going to rust, over the course of 50,000 miles, but if you put a little bit of lube on it, it's gonna keep it from rusting. So apply it to the caliper bracket and also the slide pins. So slide the pins out of the caliper, put a little bit of lube on those as well, and then go ahead and start reassembling. So once you got everything cleaned up as far as the hub, the brackets all cleaned up and stuff like that, you're ready to go ahead and start reassembling everything. So throw the new rotor on. So now that our rotor's back in place, you can go ahead and put the caliper bracket back in place. At this point, you can go ahead and get your at least your front pad put in place. The rear pad has a clip on it that actually clips into the piston on the caliper. So you're going to clip this into the caliper and then just slide the caliper into place. So next thing you want to do after you get your piston pushed back in, get your new pad, and that is going to clip into the piston. So you might have to bend these tabs a little bit on the pad to get it popped in, but once you got your pad stuck in your caliper, go ahead and rotate the caliper down into place. And then what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to line up your inner pad with the bracket. Now you can get your 2 Allen bolts restarted back in the holes. That's pretty much it. The front brake job on this thing is not hard, and really the rear isn't any harder. It's about really as easy as they get. There, you know, there's no rotor screws, nothing really. There's nothing here really that I don't think, if you've done a brake job before, no reason you can't do this one. Take your plastic covers, pop those back in. Last thing we got to do is pop this clip back in. If you forget this, you can see there's a ton of movement in this caliper, so don't forget it. The way that I get this thing in here, you take the top of it, put the top of it back behind this ear where it's supposed to be, and get this hook down in this hole where it's supposed to be. And then all you do is you just push on the bottom of it. So that one will start to go in the hole. There you go. So it takes a little bit of doing, but it's not too bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw the wheel and tire back on this thing. We're gonna get started on the rear. All right, so if you guys have done a front brake job on one of these Escapes, the rear is gonna be eerily similar. So there's a couple minor differences, but if you notice, you still have this giant clip on the outside that you gotta get off. Set that off to the side because you're gonna get a new one. The backside, same deal. It still has the plastic plugs in it holding the caliper on. So take out the plastic plugs, same size bolt, 7mm Allen bolt holding the caliper on. Get those 2 bolts taken out and get the caliper set off to the side. Bolts are backed off, the caliper should come off. Now we'll pop out the pads. The caliper bracket bolts back here in the back, they're actually 13mm. Caliper comes off. Get a lug nut, put a lug nut on here just so the rotor doesn't go flying off. Smack the back side with a hammer, get the rotor off. There you go. So as far as the rear caliper bracket, I'm doing the same thing as I did the front. I'm just throwing it in my sandblast cabinet, stripping it down, and you know, cleaning it up that way. It's just quicker, easier, and cleaner for me to do it this way than it is, you know, with a file or a wire brush or a cutoff wheel or whatever. Like I was alluding to earlier in the video with the cutoff wheel, just, you know, you can hit it real lightly and just knock the rust off, and it works great. As far as this Escape, so this Escape is my fiance's 2016 2-liter EcoBoost model, and it has close to 90,000 miles on it. It's like 89,000 and some change, and this is the first set of brakes that I put on this vehicle. And up until this point, really the only thing that I've done to this thing is we had to put a set of tires on it, and other than that, it's been fluids and filters. That's the only thing that we've done to this thing. It's been a pretty great car for, you know, 90,000 miles and really not many issues at all. One thing I will say about this generation of Escape is it's a very European design, and some of the serviceability or the service things that you need to do to the vehicle are a little bit more involved than what they should be, in my opinion. For example, to change the battery in one of these Escapes, you either have to remove the wiper cowl or remove the airbox, because the battery in this thing is absolutely buried. I haven't even replaced the battery at this point. Probably will before winter, just because otherwise I'm going to get a call that it needs a jump start from her, and the terminals are buried. One other example that I have for you is to pull the dash. So to pull the dash, if you have to do like a heater core or evap core or anything inside the dash, you have to remove both front doors, because the bolts that hold the dash in are in the door jambs near the hinges, and you can't get the bolts out without physically removing both doors. So a little bit ridiculous from the maintenance standpoint if something goes wrong, but so far this one that she had has been bulletproof, knock on wood. Same deal as the front. After you get everything blasted, cleaned up, whatever you guys need to do, just go ahead and put a little bit of lube on the surface that the pads are going to ride on, keep them from rusting up. And you're going to do the same thing, you know, with the pins. So the pins look identical. I don't know if they actually are or not, but they look extremely similar. Lube those things up, pop them back in the caliper, and we can go ahead and start reassembling. Get our rotor back in place. Use a lug nut, hold that thing on there. Next thing that we got to do is we got to push the piston back in on the caliper. Now this has the emergency brake, you know, built into the caliper. So you're going to need a special tool to basically push this piston back in. They're relatively inexpensive. They're literally between, I think, like $10 and $20. You can find these on Amazon. Like I said, they're cheap. The way this works is you have these two pins here. Those two pins go into the two holes on the piston. So what's going to happen here is you're going to tension this up until this starts to push on the caliper a little bit, and then you're just going to turn this just like that, and it's going to push the piston back in. Not a big deal at all. So just push the piston back in until it stops. I'll tighten that up by hand. Just grab a crescent, So you're using the crescent to hold the nut in place, and then you're just turning the tool, and that's spinning the piston, and as the piston spins, it goes in. So there you go. Piston's pushed back in. We can go ahead and bolt up our bracket. Next thing we're going to do is get our pads. So the outer pad doesn't have like this anti-rattle clip or whatever you want to call it here on the top, so that goes in there like that. And this one's going to sit on the inside just like this. Once that's done, pull your caliper back over. All right, last thing we got to do again is going to be this clip. So I'm going to do it kind of the same way I did the front. So you get it started in the hole, pry down. Get the bottom one started. And there you go. So serves the same function as the one in the front. Without this clip, this caliper will just do this. It's kind of crazy. So 100%, yeah, you got to have this thing in here. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw the wheel back on, but yeah, that's how you do the rear. All right guys, so the final and arguably probably one of the most important steps is pump the brakes up. If you don't, when you go put the car in gear, chances are you're gonna drive through your front wall or back through your garage door. So make sure you, you know, obviously pump the brakes up before you go put the car in gear and test driving. Guys, I'll have links in the description as always to the parts, the tools, anything you guys would need to get this job done. So as always guys, if you guys like the video, hit like. You want to see more content, go down and hit subscribe. Thanks for watching guys.